What's up? Brendan Taylor here for the College Football Y'all podcast. After a shockingly eventful week 2 in college football, remind me next time, if I ever go into a week and I decide that I'm going to underestimate the plethora of the slate that we're going to have, I want you to comment, I want you to at me, whatever you need to do to, bring me to my senses. Because I came into week 2 thinking, there's not really any big matchups. I thought the big matchups were in week 1. Week 2 was going to be weak. And then week 3 was going to be the start of 2 months of just incredible matchups each and every week. I thought, you've got this Oklahoma and Michigan game, and that's big. Ole Miss and Kentucky starting SEC play, but the only 2 teams in SEC play. It really starts next week with Tennessee and Georgia. And a few other matchups that I thought weren't going to end up being as exciting as they were. Boy, I was wrong, and I'm glad I was wrong because week 2 ended up being incredible for some people. For others, and you may be on either side, whoever you are, whatever team that you support, whoever's watching or whoever's listening out there, your team may have been on got the short end of the stick. It's going to be painful for some of you, but for some of you, it's going to be cathartic. So, like I said, it's College Football Y'all podcast. Brandon Taylor here, back again, excited to recap week 2. Thank you so much for listening, for watching. Subscribe to the podcast if you want to hear more. We have 2 videos every week. 2 videos is always the goal. We recap stuff. We look forward to the next thing. There's so much stuff that I have in store for this season. As we continue on week by week, it's already going by quick. We're going to be heading into week 3 here in just a few days. But let's just get right into it. And I wanted to start with this team. I wanted to start with Mississippi State and what they did at home in Starkville, Davis Wade Stadium versus the number 13th ranked Arizona State Sun Devils. So this Mississippi State's kind of getting overshadowed a little bit, and I really am not seeing enough people talk about it. Yeah, I know there's viral clips on the internet, but I feel like people are still more focused on the other bad things that happened this week and some of the other, like John Mateer in Oklahoma and his incredible performance, and I'll touch on that a little bit later. But for Arizona State and Mississippi State, this game, shockingly good. And Blake Shapen and Brennan Thompson from Mississippi State, man, that is a tough duo to beat. And Mississippi State, after beating their in-conference, I wouldn't say rival, but their in-conference opponent last week at Southern Miss, coming into this game with some hope. And Arizona State, this is a team that won the Big 12 last year, made it to the playoff, had hopes this season. They've lost some of their weapons. Cam Scatterbo, he's gone. Other guys, gone. But I still thought that they still would have enough firepower to, get through this season, and I still have them predicted as the Big 12 champions. I cannot go back on that because I predicted that preseason. And I'm not going to go back on any prediction that I've made, okay? Well, let's not talk about Alabama. We won't talk about Alabama in this podcast. You saw what they did against Louisiana Monroe. Enough said. But for Jeff Lebby, inheriting a mess there in Starkville, this has been a very tough few years for this program, for this administration, for that region of Mississippi, for the fans. It's been a tough few years because you have the downfall in the late 2010s. Then you get Mike Leach. Mike Leach comes in, and he's this charismatic, he's one of my favorite coaches of all time. Just because of who he is, he's different, and he was not afraid to be different. And it wasn't an act. That's literally who he was. Mississippi State, maybe takes a risk in hiring him. They have a few years of some success, but, things could have been a little bit better. And unfortunately, he passes away. And that was very tough. And that's a rare thing to happen in college football. in any sport, really, for a sitting head coach to pass away like that. Then you've got the interim, and then you've got, you hire your defensive coordinator, and things just don't work out. And the program is in pieces. Then Jeff Lebby takes the job. Coming from Oklahoma, he worked under Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss with Matt Corral, and he's been at Oklahoma before, had all this experience. He decides to take all of this and try to do something with it. And last season, it didn't work out. 2-10, rough. And there are other teams in Mississippi that can relate to that. And I'll explain all that in a minute, because Ole Miss and Southern Miss, fans of all the other schools in the state, they can relate to, these tough times. Also, Kenny Dillingham, head coach for Arizona State, going into this game, talking a little trash, not necessarily about Mississippi State, the school, but the state of Mississippi as a whole. Mississippi, if you're a fan of any of these three main universities in the state, yes, there's a huge rivalry, the Egg Bowl, between Ole Miss and Mississippi State. In my opinion, top 3 rivalry of all time. But it's perfectly fine to talk about the other school. That's how rivalries go, right? You can think of the Iron Bowl. You can think of Michigan, Ohio State, and others. It's fine to talk trash about the other school's city, town, the other school's fan base, the other school just in general, okay? But when you are an outsider like Kenny Dillingham in Arizona State, and you talk bad about the state of Mississippi, that all of these 3 schools inherit, that they are in, that they live in, that they their majority of their fan base is from, that's a whole different story. Because then you're not just, you're not just making fun of Mississippi State fans. You're making fun of everybody. And that's one thing about Mississippi that I will say, that those of you that have never been here, that don't know anything about the state of Mississippi, those folks stick together. Because Mississippi can be the low-hanging fruit, especially to ignorant people that don't know the truth and never been here, maybe have been here but never saw what Mississippi truly is. They have this, it's not even 2-dimensional. It's like a 1-dimensional viewpoint of the state. So I saw a lot of Ole Miss and Southern Miss fans and fans in general, because we've got a lot of Alabama fans as well, in Mississippi. Everybody coming together, supporting the Bulldogs, rivalries, rival teams, rival fan bases, supporting the Bulldogs in this game, rooting for Mississippi State, because you don't mess with Mississippi. And man, Mississippi State came out firing on all cylinders. It was a dominating first half by the Bulldogs. Arizona State was outscored 17-3 in the first half, and really that third score there was late in the second quarter, right before halftime. And that came off of a shanked punt and a penalty that put Arizona State in field goal range. So Mississippi State shot themselves in the foot there. That gave Arizona State those points. Sam Leavitt, quarterback for Arizona State, went to halftime 5 of 15 for 30 yards and an interception. Whatever they were doing was not working at all, offense or defense. So the coaching staff there, Sun Devil coaching staff, they went and drew up a new game plan at halftime. They came out with a little bit different strategy, I would say. They gradually worked their way back to a 17-17 tie in the fourth quarter. And, that part of that was Mississippi State just struggling after the halftime. They, at least in the third quarter and half of the fourth quarter could not reproduce what they did in the first half. But this all comes to a head late in the fourth quarter. It's 17-17. Arizona State drives the ball down the field, and they get to the goal line. They get inside the 5-yard line, and there's a goal line stand on 3rd and goal. Linebacker Nick Mitchell blows through the line and stops a touchdown that would make a comeback by Mississippi State very difficult. So Arizona State decides, okay, we're going to take the points. We'll kick a field goal. We'll go up 3. So it's 20-17. Ole Miss had Mississippi State. Oh, excuse me. Mississippi State. Mississippi State has about a minute and a half left. And I knew watching this game, I thought, they've got plenty of time. They have their timeouts. Blake Shapen and Brennan Thompson have been clicking all night. There's been, a plethora of other Mississippi State receivers that have made catches, that have made plays. Their running game hasn't been incredible. They've gained double-digit yards by multiple running backs, which isn't hard to do, but nevertheless. So they don't even need all minute and a half. Because Shapen connects with Thompson on a 58-yard game-winning touchdown pass. The place absolutely goes crazy. It's this scene that, you haven't saw at Mississippi State in a long time. The fans were there. They were ready. They were rallying around. I will say this about the Mississippi State fans. They really came out and they really showed their support for this team. And I know it's hard to, especially after last season. You're really not confident about this year. Everybody's, you're predicted to finish last or near the last in the SEC. The over-under win total was 3.5. And to have this moment, and if you watch that, it was incredible to see. And you say, well, this kind of stuff happens all the time, Brandon, but you've got to think of the context here. This Mississippi State team, I've already said it, in shambles. They've had years and years and years of dread. Ole Miss fans have been there. They know what it's like to go through 2-10 seasons. Southern Miss fans have had worse years. And all this is in the past 15 to 20 years. There's been really tough times by every school in Mississippi. So they all understand what that feels like. And they also understand what it's like to triumph and succeed, especially over a team like this that was ranked 13th in the country. And then you throw in the Mississippi aspect. Everybody together. All of us together. All 3 schools together to root for Mississippi State. It all came together perfectly. For Arizona State, Sam Leavitt did finish the game 10 of 22, 82 yards, 1 touchdown, and threw 2 interceptions. That second interception was in their last drive. They did get the ball back with minimal time left, and he threw a terrible pass. It looks like it may have kind of came off his fingers funny. Mississippi State intercepted it to seal the game. Jordan Tyson, 6 receptions, 68 yards, and 1 touchdown. Not an incredible performance on offense from Arizona State, and that was most of that I just told you was second half stats. But Mississippi State seals it. They win. Blake Shapen takes a knee, and the fans come on the field, and you have a scene that it was the 90s. I did see that. It was the 90s the last time that the field was stormed there at Davis Wade Stadium. So, look, I'm pro field storming. I will always be pro field storming. I don't care what anybody says, anybody's excuse. It's fine. Yeah, they got fined $500,000. They don't care. It's dropping the bucket compared to the experience of winning this game after this team has been through what they've been through, giving these fans this moment. It's worth it to me. I know that's silly, but you got to think about the millions and millions and millions of dollars that these teams make. Now, you can't be storming the field multiple times a year. Okay. You can do it once, but once you do it multiple times in a year or multiple times within 2 or 3 seasons, it can get kind of silly, but you'll never see me arguing against field storming. Great effort by Mississippi State. They have a chance to win 6 games. How they're going to do that? Well, a few things have to happen, and a couple upsets have to take place. I'm going to look at their schedule, and we're going to work through this. See, I thought that they were going to go over their 3.5 win total. I thought 5 games was possible for Mississippi State. But now, as you're looking at it now, they're going to probably win their other non-conference games. So you automatically have 4 there. Okay. So you've got Alcorn State and then Northern Illinois. So right there, you've got 2 weeks of wins, continuing to build your confidence. You already faced a tough team, and then you're going to get through your non-conference schedule. You'll be 4-0. And then you'll have Tennessee at home. Then you have to travel to Texas A&M. Then you'll travel to the Swamp to play Florida. Those 3 weeks are not going to be that easy. Then Texas comes to town, and you have a chance to do some incredible things in that game. Then you go to Arkansas, and then there's Georgia at home, at Missouri, and then the Egg Bowl in Starkville versus Ole Miss. November 28th, the last game of the regular season. It's possible they can win 6 games. They'll have 4 going out of non-conference, and then you have to either beat, you could beat a Florida, man, you could. You could beat a Texas A&M. You could beat an Arkansas. You could win the Egg Bowl. Anything can happen. The worst thing that Ole Miss can go through is to have a good season, be on the verge of the playoff, and then have a Mississippi State team that is 5 wins fighting for a bowl spot, something that was unimaginable a year ago and even going into this season. And if Mississippi State could beat Ole Miss, become bowl eligible, and knock Ole Miss out of the playoff, it's the greatest season that's ever been at Mississippi State, because recency bias is real as in college football fandom. But that's enough about Mississippi State. Congratulations to them. But I want to move on. Oh, man. The Florida Gators are going through something right now that I didn't expect. Maybe I should have expected it. Billy Napier. I like the guy. I have nothing against Billy Napier. I've liked to poke fun at him the past few years, especially when, things happen that I feel like he's very responsible for. Stuff that's not just players playing bad or players just, the team not being the best on that particular day. But for other things, I put my faith in Billy Napier last year, and I thought he was going to be fine. And I say this, and I'll keep saying this because I feel like nobody felt the same way. I knew he wasn't getting fired last year. I knew no matter what happened, they were not going to fire him. Scott Strickland was not going to fire him. He couldn't afford to himself. And then we get to this year. And I think, okay, DJ Lagway. He had some injury problems. He was a little bit injury prone. If he can stay healthy, if his weapons can stay healthy, they can win some games. And a lot of people had them a lot higher than I had them. I think this could have been an 8-win team. But now I don't know what to think. And by the way, we're going to update the SEC hot seat gauge for all the SEC coaches. There is one name that's going to change, and that's Billy Napier, because his seat just got a whole lot hotter very quick. And we'll change. We'll go through the gauge, and throughout the season, we'll adjust it accordingly. I had my preseason, everything set preseason, but it can change. Some coaches, majority of the coaches will stay where they are, but there are some that will fluctuate as the year goes on. Some probably going to get a lot hotter than, the chance that they'll get any cooler. So, South Florida, the Bulls, they come to the Swamp to play the Gators. This is a South Florida team that beat Boise State, the Mountain West champion last year, the Group of Five resident, if you want to use a word like that, of the college football playoff. South Florida beats them last week. Okay. Top 25 win already. They come into the Swamp and they beat Florida 18-16. DJ Lagway goes 23 of 33, 222 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Byron Brown for South Florida goes 23 of 36, 263 yards, and 1 touchdown. If you just look at both of those stats, I mean, pretty good stats either way, if you ask me. Because you think, okay, maybe there was some run game established as well. But this game, from Florida's standpoint, was ugly. There was a lot of mistakes. A safety on a wild snap on a punt for Florida. And something that I said cannot happen. And that is undisciplined players. If Billy Napier wants to keep his job, yeah, he's got to win so many games. But he's got to show discipline. He's got to show that he has control of his program, has control of his players. They cannot be making stupid, dumb, mental mistakes. And what did they do in week 2? Anybody? Dumb mental mistakes. Both dumb football mistakes and dumb personal, like, I don't know what you're thinking kind of mistakes. Like back in 2020, the infamous shoe throw against LSU that knocked Florida out of any chance of going to the playoff. Brendan Bett, defensive lineman, decides he wants to spit on somebody. Okay? And this was after Dejon Johnson was called for pass interference. So, you're trying to seal the game. You're trying to stop South Florida on their last chance to have any chance of winning this game. And then you make a dumb, stupid mental error like that. What happens? South Florida goes downfield. Literally on the next play after the spitting incident occurred. Long pass. South Florida goes on down the field and they kick the game-winning field goal as time expires. Now, honestly, if you're Billy Napier, you should be pissed off. And Billy Napier, look, he's a good guy. I know he's a good guy, and I have nothing against him personally. He does not get fired up enough about this. He should be pissed off. Now, he said in his press conference, he said, this team's just not that good. He said, we're not there yet. Okay, week 2, going into week 3, stuff is getting real here, Billy. You still have an undisciplined team. You still have players making dumb mental mistakes. Insert insert comment about Georgia players and their speeding issues and their reckless driving issues. Yeah, that is a whole different story. At least Kirby Smart's winning. At the same time, what I just said is part of the problem. As long as they're winning ball games, none of that matters, right? No, I think that's wrong too. But we're not talking about Kirby Smart, and we're not talking about Georgia and their notorious vehicular issues. We're talking about a Florida team that just cannot, like, they're outlaw. They played terrible, and they allowed, like, South Florida to get into their head, which is exactly what South Florida wanted, and look what happened. Florida has a hell of a schedule this season. First of all, they played Long Island in week 1 and won 55-0. That means absolutely nothing. You lose at home to South Florida. By the way, South Florida, Black Horse, Dark Horse, Fringe, whatever you want to call them. We got to be thinking about South Florida here. We'll see. I don't want to put my money on them at this point, but look out for them. We remember they almost beat a Nick Saban coached Alabama team just a short while ago. Florida has to travel to the true Death Valley next week. This week, actually. They got to play LSU. And LSU is somehow only a 9.5 point favorite currently. Then they have to go and they had at Miami Gardens, they play Miami. Then they're back at home versus Arch Manning in Texas, before they have to travel to College Station, play the Aggies. And then they get Mississippi State, who just beat what we all perceive to be a good Arizona State team. And then you got the cocktail party. And then you've got Kentucky in Lexington. And then you got to travel to Oxford to play the Ole Miss Rebels, who could be hot at that point of the season. I don't know. Back at home the next week versus Tennessee. Not going to be a cakewalk. And then in the last week of the season, at home, you got Florida State. The Seminoles coming to town. The Seminoles who whooped Alabama last week. Billy Napier's seat has moved from moderately warm to on fire. I wish I had the graphic up to show that here on the video. It's where he should have been anyway. I was still giving him the benefit of the doubt, and I've been giving him the benefit of the doubt, but I cannot any longer. Napier, he's going to be fired this year. Whether that happens at the end of the season or that happens in the middle of the season, it's going to happen. This cannot go on any longer. I don't care what I think his buyout. I think I read it earlier. It's like around $20 million. It's no problem for the Gators. It's no problem for the boosters. Whoever donates money to that school, I'm sure they're willing to fork that over in some way to get him out of there and move on to the next thing. Funniest thing could happen here. Dan Mullen's doing pretty darn good over at UNLV. Yeah. It's a good, huh? They should look into that. But moving on from Florida and that disaster, that train wreck, I want to talk about this Ole Miss-Kentucky game. You know, Kentucky and Ole Miss have had a history in the past few years. As I take a sip of water. Ole Miss and Kentucky. Their games of the past few seasons have been within, a touchdown, within just a few points. Ole Miss came into this game last season, as we all probably know. Kentucky comes to Oxford. Ole Miss was coming off of 4 cupcakes. And this is a season, you've got Jackson Dart, you've got Walter Nolan, you've got all these players, this plethora of NFL caliber talent on this football team on both sides of the ball. Kentucky comes into town. Ole Miss isn't ready. They didn't play like they were ready. Mark Stoops, outcoached Lane Kiffin and his coaching staff. Kentucky steals the win in Oxford, and really that ended up being the outlier. That game right there was what knocked Ole Miss out of the playoff. Yeah, because they lost at LSU in literally the last play in overtime. And then Jackson Dart had a, pretty bad performance, and other players just they wasn't on the same page when they went to the Swamp later in the year. But this game last year was what kept Ole Miss out of the playoff. Because you could have won this game, you could have lost those other two games, and they would have been, just fine. So a little bit of that animosity, even though you've got a lot of roster turnover, you've got a new quarterback in Austin Simmons. He was there last year, though, by the way. So he knows. He knows what that felt like. But coming into this game, Austin Simmons' first true test since taking the reins over at quarterback. Road game, not the toughest opponent, but we should see something. He should, at least in week 2, you're getting a little bit of a tough opponent, a conference opponent. It's better than playing a cupcake. Simmons goes 13 to 24 for 235 yards. That's 9.8 average yards per attempt, and 2 interceptions. 2 bad interceptions. One of them being a botched snap. He picks the ball up and just gets rid of it. Bad decision. The other one was a bad decision as well. He had a little bit of a shaky day. Now, he did run for 44 yards and 1 touchdown. But really, the story of this game for the Rebels, now Austin Simmons still learning. He's getting better. I mean, a lot of people are, they're not used to this. You had Matt Corral, and then you got Jackson Dart, who is, first-round draft pick for the New York Giants. And I don't think Ole Miss fans were ready for a step back at quarterback. I think he's going to be fine. He's smart. He's talented. He's not the only, he's not all that they have. Trinidad Chambliss is the backup quarterback. You're going to see him more. He's a senior. He's a little bit older. You're going to see him, I think, in some probably short yardage packages. But I think he can throw the ball too. I'll be excited to see how they do that. Not that there's any kind of quarterback battle, and not that they're going to really do any kind of 2 quarterback system, but I just think Trinidad Chambliss is going to be included maybe a little bit more in the offense, maybe in some kind of wildcat formation or, something like that. But the story for Ole Miss is Kewan Lacey. Man, 28 carries. They handed him the rock a bunch of times. He had 138 yards, just under 5 average yards per carry, 1 touchdown. His longest run was 33 yards. He showed himself last week versus Georgia State and making some incredible moves, and just, he's going to be a good, valuable asset to this team. And in this game, he was helpful. They don't win this game without him. And if you have him on the team last year, man, this is a playoff team, no doubt. He's a sophomore. He's 5'11", 200 pounds from Dallas, Texas. So far this season, just in these 2 games, he's had 44 carries for 246 yards and 4 touchdowns. And man, I see him running all over Arkansas this weekend. The only thing, and the reason that I said they would be a playoff team last year is because that offensive line was a lot better last year. The running back room just wasn't there. That whole running back debacle, I don't want to talk about that again. I don't want to beat a dead horse. That's in the past. It was pretty rough. You have him on last year's team. They are unstoppable. So if he can get around this weak, young offensive line, given that this offensive line doesn't improve from week to week, I think he's still going to be. You've got to have somebody like him that can bounce off tacklers, that can find his way around, that can find the hole, find the gaps. You've got to have somebody like that. And a bigger, not one of these 5'10", 175-pound running backs. You got a 5'11", just might as well say 6 foot, 200 pounds, especially if he's probably not going to put any weight on. But let's just say, in the offseason, he puts on a little bit of weight, gets about around 210. If that doesn't affect his speed, can you imagine 210, 215, speedy running back, barreling down the field? You don't see a whole lot of big running backs like that anymore, do you? We need to bring back the fullback. Bring back some old school stuff. So for Kentucky, Zach Calzada, and if you recognize that name, it's because he's been around. No pun intended. No pun intended. He's been around. From Beaufort, Georgia, he had a stint there at Texas A&M. Let's see, Texas A&M, and then he went to Incarnate Word for a couple years before coming to Kentucky. So he's been in college since 2019. That's a long time ago. But in this game, he went 15 of 30, 149 yards, no touchdowns. Their touchdowns came on the ground. Seth McGowan, 15 carries, 93 yards, and 2 touchdowns. They also, trying to see here. So he got injured late in the game, his shoulder, after he threw the ball. I don't know what his status is currently. I hate that for him. I'm starting to see if I have any kind of update. I don't think I do. Maybe he's fine. I know he didn't finish the game. It looked like he may have had a little bit of a shoulder issue, and I've seen several shoulder injuries or possible shoulder injuries already this season. That's kind of concerning to me, but what was the story of this game? It started slow for Ole Miss, but as I was watching this, Kentucky got up to a 10-0 start. But I wasn't worried for Ole Miss, even though they got behind early. I thought they were in business. They didn't let it bother them. They scored 17 points in the second half going into the halftime. So great start, at least to finish the half. I think I would rather go into halftime with confidence rather than, getting all your points early in the first quarter and then going into halftime empty. I would prefer to go in with some confidence because they came out in the third quarter, scored 10, and scored a field goal in the fourth to make it 30-23. Boy, let's talk about this. Let's talk about the spread here. I had it locked at Ole Miss 9.5. Regardless if it was 7.5 or 9.5, it wouldn't have mattered. 8.5, it wouldn't have mattered. Whatever it was locked in at wouldn't have mattered because it was somewhere between 7.5 to 9.5. Kentucky's going down the field on that final drive. Ole Miss has already scored. They're up 30-20. 10 points. Covering the spread. Kentucky's going down the field. They have no timeouts. Clock's running. Lane Kiffin calls a timeout. And Stoops is sitting over there on the sidelines. Let's kick the field goal. And then we'll try to do an onside kick, and then we'll go from there. They kick the field goal, go up 30-23. Ole Miss isn't covering the spread anymore. That's how the game ends. Lane Kiffin apologized for that right after the game, which is interesting. He said, sorry for everybody betting. Okay. Now, first of all, apology not accepted, Lane. See, he does stuff like that. Bothers the crap out of me. Look, Lane, if you don't call the timeout, just let it run out. They're going to try to score. I don't think they're going to, rush the field goal unit out there. I think they're going to try to get the touchdown. But, okay, since they're going to call a timeout, since they're going to stop the clock for us, we might as well kick it. And that's what happened there. Nevertheless, Ole Miss gets the revenge over this Kentucky team, and maybe that builds some confidence as they're going into this week where they have Arkansas at home. Now, you think this Kentucky game's been weird the past few years? The Arkansas game has been weird for decades. Going back to the early 2000s, the 7 overtime game in Oxford back in 2001, where Arkansas ended up winning the game. Eli Manning at quarterback there for Ole Miss. Oh, man. Speaking of that, moment of silence for the true overtime. The old school overtime. Where every so often we would have a 7 overtime thriller once every few years. Stand up. Moment of silence. Here at College Football, y'all, we know that the new overtime rules are garbage. Go back to the old system. If it's not broke, don't fix it. Now, Kentucky's in Stoops. It's not happening. Talking about another coach that could be out of a job at the end of the season. I think Kentucky fans are fed up with it. You know, if they win this game, I mean, there's a little bit of confidence, but, especially if Calzada ends up being hurt, if that lingers on into the season, it's going to be a tough couple months for the Wildcats. For Ole Miss, the jury's still out, and they're deliberating. What can Austin Simmons do? He's going to make more bad decisions. He's going to throw more interceptions. That's just going to happen. He's a young quarterback in the SEC. But I want to go from there and see if there's really any other, SEC games other than the Oklahoma game that I want to talk about. You had LSU beating Louisiana Tech 23-7. That's kind of interesting. Georgia getting it done versus Austin Peay 28-6. That game had a weird weather delay. You know, those games are weird. Texas and Arch Manning beating San Jose State 38-7. Is that a developing story with the possible Arch Manning shoulder injury? I don't know. But it appeared to be that, to me at least, that Arch Manning could have possibly been in some pain throwing the ball. I don't know. Steve Sarkisian just completely blew that off. Could be something to watch for in the next few weeks. South Carolina gets the win over South Carolina State 38-10. We've talked about those. Texas A&M beats Utah State 44-22. Alabama whoops Louisiana Monroe 73-0. And let's see, Missouri and Kansas. Missouri wins 41-31. Vanderbilt beats Virginia Tech. Look at Vandy. Watch out for the Commodores. 44-20 over Virginia Tech. Let's talk about this Michigan-Oklahoma game. All right, this would be the biggest game of the week because you've got number 15, number 18. Oh, man. John Mateer. 21-34, 270 yards, 1 touchdown. He did throw an interception. Rushing, though, this kid, on 19 carries, 74 yards, 2 touchdowns on the ground. He had a 19-yard rush, was his longest one. Man, John Mateer, there's a lot of season to go. And Oklahoma has, not as tough of a schedule as like a Florida, for example, or an LSU, or an Ole Miss. But, man, John Mateer he's a playmaker. And if you compare him to Bryce Underwood on the other side, Bryce Underwood didn't have that great of a day. 9 of 24, 142 yards, no touchdowns. Their success was on the ground with Justice Haynes, 19 carries, 125 yards, and a touchdown. Not really much doing through the air, really, for either of these teams, but especially for Michigan. Like I said, Mateer had 270 yards through the air. You were just dealing with a pretty good Michigan defense. John Mateer is, people have talked about him being possible Heisman contender. I didn't buy into that. I'm not ruling that out. But, as you look at the quarterbacks that have all been considered since the preseason of possible, who's the best quarterback in the SEC, who is, Heisman contender. Obviously, there was Arch Manning, who's way overhyped. He didn't deserve that. He didn't deserve, for that pressure to be put on him, but he also didn't deserve it because he didn't show anything because we have barely saw him. And then you've got, who else? You got John Mateer that a lot of people have had faith in. Garrett Nussmeier down there at LSU. One more. Who's the other one? Anybody? No. DJ Lagway. Look, we're not going to talk about DJ Lagway. Okay. If he, helps to, if he can revive this Florida team and they can end up, winning out or something crazy like that, we'll talk about him. But for right now, he gets put on the back burner, and that's not his fault. Lenore Sellers, another guy that has an incredibly high ceiling, but I just don't know that he's shown it yet. And I like him. He is like a 240-pound absolute beast. Monster truck. But he hasn't really, in my opinion, just watching these games, really shown, that he's been pushing that ceiling. He's got a lot of chances this season to show that, but as of this point, I think he's, below some of these other quarterbacks. It's just weird. The SEC is clashing every single week, and it's going to be a bloodbath all season. It's going that way. It's going to continue that way, and it's started this week. But man, is it going to really kick into high gear in week 3. And we're going to talk about week 3 in the next episode, and we're going to look towards games like obviously Georgia and Tennessee, Florida LSU, Texas A&M and Notre Dame, Vanderbilt and South Carolina, Arkansas and Ole Miss. We're going to really highlight those. What are some other games that are going on around the country that might be interesting? Clemson and Georgia Tech could be interesting. Wisconsin and Alabama. There's no need to even talk about that one. I said that last week, and look what happened to Florida. But really, South Florida and Miami. South Florida traveling to Miami. Oh, wow. That's right. The number 18th ranked South Florida Bulls traveling down to Miami Gardens, Hard Rock Stadium to face the number 5th ranked Miami Hurricanes. That will be one that we will look in depth. Really look into these teams because I was really high on Miami. South Florida could do something really great this Saturday. Miami opening up at a 17.5-point favorite. Possible under? I don't know. Are we putting too much faith into South Florida? Possibly. But look, it was an eventful week 2. Excited for it. One more, I'm just going to update you one more time. Yes, Billy Napier is moving up to a extremely hot seat, like the hottest of hots. So, already having movement this season. Just in week 2, an already movement in the SEC coaches' hot seat gauge. Plenty more movement to come before the season's over. Well, that's going to just about do it for this episode of College Football, y'all. I want to thank you so much, wherever you are, however you may be watching or listening to this. Keep up with it. Subscribe to the podcast on all the platforms. That way you will see exactly when I post. I try to post these early in the morning. There's also the YouTube channel. College Football, y'all, is what the name of it is, obviously. And you can see all our videos You can watch the video version of all these podcasts and more. Also have TikTok. It's at Brandon Taylor CFB. On Twitter or X, it's at Brandon T CFB because Brandon Taylor CFB was too many characters. So anyway, we'll talk about week 3 on the next episode later this week. Stay tuned for that. We got a lot to talk about. Another exciting week of college football coming up right here. College football, y'all. Brandon Taylor saying good night, good morning, peace, love, all those good things. We'll see you in the next one.